Okay, week 12, part 2 begins with our last Mesoamerican group, the Toltecs. And then we'll move on to South and North America. After 900 CE, Mayan civilization began a decline, as mentioned at the end of the last section. Of course, the Maya do not disappear, but later Mayan culture groups like Chichen Itza are called by the traditional art historical term post-classic, which frames Chichen Itza as lesser and following the superior classic era. So we will use the somewhat more neutral and perhaps more historically accurate term Toltec to describe the culture of Chichen Itza, which is what the much later Aztecs called the cultures of 900 to 1200 CE. Toltec is the name given to two Mesoamerican cultures that flourished from 900 to 1200. Toltec is a word of Aztec origin that means reed people, more idiomatically, wise ones or ancient ones. The two Toltec cultures are quite a long distance from each other. Chichen Itza is in the Yucatan Peninsula, and Tula Hidalgo is in the Valley of Mexico. But their artwork is uncannily similar in a way that belies their distance. According to local history, sometime around the year 987 CE, Tula may have overtaken Chichen Itza and made it a part of its empire. This is disputed, however. When one sees the relative sizes of Tula and Chichen Itza, it seems more likely that the seizure happened the other way around. Chichen Itza is huge. We'll just examine artwork from Chichen Itza, but the works we'll see can be found very similarly in Tula as well. In fact, it was these artistic similarities that drew the connection between the two for archaeologists in the first place. As with all our Mesoamerican sites, Chichen Itza has a large stepped pyramid with a small temple on top. This is known as El Castillo, the castle in Spanish, but it is indeed a temple. The temple was until very recently accessible by its stairs to thousands of spring break visitors every year, but the state of the temple has recently been in severe decline, and it is now closed to tourists from what I understand. El Castillo is interesting for a number of reasons, one of which is the presence of large serpent heads at the bottom of the staircases. You can see two of them here quite easily. These open-mouthed serpents can be found all over Chichen Itza and Tula and will be emulated by the later Aztecs, who looked to the Toltecs as their great predecessors. The serpent heads can be seen at the bases of the column at Chichen Itza's Temple of the Warriors as well, a multi-level structure, which you can see here. Temple of the Warriors. Here we go. Can see it here. Temple of the Warriors. Finally found it. This is a multi-level structure with a large covered entryway, would have once been covered, and upper level, which is a style of architecture that's also found at Tula. Again, connecting these two very distant cultures. Common also to both of these Toltec cities is the Shakmol. This is the Shakmol. It's a reclining figure that will reappear later in Aztec art. The Shakmol holds a bowl on its belly, typically, that may have held sacrificial items like paper with blood on it, or perhaps a heart or other organs. The military costume and stressed or visibly sort of grimacing face, it often seems when we see it, leads people to believe it represents either a captive warrior who is going to be sacrificed or a rain deity. See the back view as Shakmol there. It's of course possible that it represents both a captive warrior and a sacrificial victim and a rain deity at the same time. Aside from the monumental El Castillo, which you can see here is much more well preserved on one side than another, Chichen Itza is best known for its ball court. We've seen a Mayan ball court in Copan, and it was of an average size. The ball court at Chichen Itza is believed to be the largest ball court ever built in the Americas. And what you're seeing here is one end zone of the ball court. These high walls are surrounding the lane, and then the other end would be somewhere over here. It is huge. The court is so large that only one of the parts of it is visible here. Tall walls surround the center lane and rings hover many feet off the ground, which you can see here, leaving the viewer to wonder if and how the players might get the rubber ball through them. Chichen Itza's ball court is also surrounded by artwork glorifying the game. The Toltec or post-classic period in Mesoamerica ends at roughly 1200. It's not that the peoples of Mesoamerica disappear. They, of course, are with us today. It seems instead that the large civilizations they were living in weren't giving the people of the Yucatan and former Mayan empires what they needed, so they lived in smaller villages. Shortly after 1300 in Mesoamerica, the Aztecs and Mixtecs will rise to prominence in the Valley of Mexico, and their artwork is discussed in Art 282. Prior to the rise of the Inca, the last prominent group in South America before European colonization, several culture groups lived in the Andean mountain range, the Andes Mountains, on the west coast of South America. Like in Mesoamerica, the Andes region provided a variety of types of environments or climates: highlands and mountains, valleys, coastal areas, arid and temperate. People had been living even in very southern South America since at least 14,000 BCE. In this section, we'll review some works of prominent ancient South American cultures. First, we'll take a look at Chavin de Huantar, which is from 900 to 200 BCE. Like Mesoamerica, South American cultures have one group that is called their mother culture. For South America, it is Chavin de Huantar. Chavin may have been, like Teotihuacan, a place of pilgrimage used by neighboring villages. Chavin de Huantar's city center is dominated by platforms, pyramid-like but flat-topped structures that probably more closely resemble the old mastaba of ancient Egypt. Platforms at Chavin de Huantar formed a U shape which contained the old palace and new palace, both apparently important places of ritual. In front of the platform is a sunken plaza used for rituals. Inside the old temples is a series of increasingly narrow corridors which led to the lanzon. You can see a kind of cross section, narrow corridor down to the lanzon chamber, very, very skinny chamber. The lanzon is named because it's a lance-shaped image, or a sort of staff-shaped image of a fanged deity. Here you can see the lanzon in situ, that is in its place where it belongs, with its fangs, its upturned eye, its nose, and it's got some shapes of hands and legs and so on as well. This is a sort of staff god, a type of presentation of a deity that is popular here and elsewhere in the world. Here you can see another photo of the lanzon that shows the hand a little better, as well as the legs and feet. Here's another view of the lanzon, and you can see just how skinny it is and how skinny the corridor is. The Raimondi stela, or Raimondi stone, on the screen is another example from Chavin of a staff god. The figure is carved shallowly into the rock. The fanged deity appears to at once be part of a tall staff and also carry two staffs. In fact, the ambiguity of the staff shapes is echoed in other parts of the sculpture. If you look at a drawing of the sculpture, like this one, it's easier to see the visual puns, also known as contour rivalry. Let's see if I can give you a better view of the entire thing. Visual puns are common at Chavin de Huantar. That's clever images that are seen in more than one way. Contour rivalry is a similar concept. Images share edges with one another, and they can be seen in multiple ways. See how many fanged or other kinds of faces or images that you can find in the drawing of the Raimondi stone. Hint, many of them are upside down. The next South American group we'll look at is Paracas, which flourished from about 600 to 200 BCE to CE. The people of the Paracas culture of Peru created a number of art forms during the era of their florescence. Like their successors, the Nazca and the Moche, Paracas artists made double-spouted ceramic vessels. You can see an example of a double-spouted ceramic vessel here on the screen. They also conducted elaborate burials that involved dozens of woven and embroidered textiles, examples of which we're going to take a look at here shortly. So here is an embroidered mantle that is a very large blanket, 56 by 95 inches. It's woven with alpaca fiber, camelid fiber, and then embroidered on top with these images. Here's another example of a mantle, this one about 8 feet long. You can see it's in a little worse shape. And here is a close-up where you can see the embroidery. These images that are in the embroidery tend to look like figures that are in costume. You can see little eyes peeking out from a large headdress and costume. So they may be what we call impersonators or shaman figures. Though the artists were able to form many different shapes with it, the fine embroidery was done with only one kind of stitch. These textiles, large pieces called mantles, were finely crafted and very highly valued. They would be wrapped about the seated body of the deceased person in many layers, creating what anthropologists call mummy bundles. The arid climate of the mountains where Paracas burials occurred has allowed for many of these textiles to remain intact, even though, as we know, fibrous material usually deteriorates very quickly. Based on the quality and number of pieces found, it appears that Paracas may have been a sort of fiber arts center in the Andes. You can read more about Andean textiles on page 397 in your book. The next South American group that we will examine is the Nazca, who were flourished between 0 and 700 CE. The people who occupied the Nazca Plain during this time also created double-spouted ceramics and textiles. Let's take a look at a couple of them. All right, here we can see some of those double-spouted vessels. You can also see that they have this stirrup style. That is, they have the shape of a stirrup, probably for use of hanging off of some sort of hanger to make them more convenient to use. Here's one that's in the form of a figure. Very cute. But Nazca are really best known for images like this one, the large-scale artworks called the Nazca line drawings. The Nazca lines are geoglyphs, drawings in the earth, that measure between 200 and 800 feet long. They are created by removing the top layer of brown pebbles and exposing the white chalky earth underneath. The images are interesting because they are of such large scale that the artists themselves would not be able to actually view most of them. They were discovered, so to speak, by pilots flying over the region. Now let's take a look at the Moche Kingdom, which was from about 100 to 600 CE. The Moche Kingdom is derived from the ancient Chavin culture. It was centered in the arid desert of the capital of Moche. They extended their kingdom into a loosely linked empire that lasted for 500 years. Like their predecessors, the Moche artists created stirrup and double-spouted ceramic. The Moche artists painted the terracotta pots with motifs, and for some they also modeled facial features and figural images. These rather realistic pieces are often called portrait head vessels. By the examples that you're seeing on the screen, you can see that the artist's works were unique and highly individualized. One figure on the screen is missing an eye, while another has a humorously mopey face and a flower in his cap. The vessel portraits are usually wearing ear spools. You can see 2 ear spools here. Large bar-shaped earrings with discs on front and back like a thread spool. The Moche created large platforms called huacas with adobe mud brick. Let's see if I can find an image for you. Here we go. It's the Huaca de la Luna. Some of these served as burials for royal or other important individuals. One of the best preserved royal graves in South America history is that of the individual known as the Lord of Sipan, who your book calls the warrior priest, which is perhaps a better title. This tomb has been dubbed the King Tut of South America, for it was found relatively intact with many good remaining. With the Spanish in the 1500s having brought back to Spain every ounce of South American gold that they could find and melting it down for use as money, the intact state of the warrior priest's tomb is even more important. The warrior priest or lord of Sipan was buried with a number of pieces of pottery as well as a large number of luxury goods in gold, silver, turquoise, and shell. The Moche culture understood metalworking and used it mostly for ritual and ceremonial goods, especially in precious metals. An ear spool from the burial seems to depict the Lord of Sipan himself, for it is dressed in a virtually identical way with the body, the large fan-shaped headdress and a necklace depicting human heads or owls' heads. Inlay in turquoise and shell make the gold-based earring colorful. Let's see if we can find the bean runner one. Sometimes we see them depicting what are known as bean runners. There he is. These figures appear to be running, sometimes several of them together, carrying a fistful of something that has been identified by art historians as beans. The runners are also called ritual runners because they often appear in a ritual context. You can see like on this vessel. They don't seem to be running for any particular practical reason. Some have animal features like this one, which has wings and the head of a bird, and others are fully human like these. So are they messengers? Are they shamans? It's not really clear. All right, and let's take a look at ancient North America. The pre-Columbian peoples of North America generally lived pretty different lives than those in Meso and South America. Most native North Americans lived hunter-gatherer lives and were usually nomadic. Though North America was more sparsely populated than the regions we've studied so far, the lands of North America were claimed by a variety of tribal identified people who spoke a variety of languages and held varying belief systems. As your book points out, the nature of colonization in North America also differed from that of Meso and South America. Rather than being taken suddenly by force, North America was slowly occupied by European families and religious groups. Once Native Americans and the colonizers start to get in each other's way, that's when we see a systematic takeover of Native Americans' lands through bribery and treaties, which were often broken, and sometimes deliberate genocide. Paleo-Indian sites abound throughout North America and have revealed arrowhead points and atlatls or spear throwers and even ceremonial centers in places like Poverty Point. Here's some points, there's some spear throwers, and there's the Poverty Point site in Louisiana. Early Native American cultures from which we have significant numbers of artifacts include the Adena and Hopewell cultures in the Midwest. These cultures created small, handheld artworks of a spiritual nature, usually found over here in the plains and northeast. So you might find from the Adena or Hopewell culture something like this small beaver platform pipe, a small handheld item of spiritual significance, or this small platform pipe. You might also see large-scale burial mounds like this Great Serpent Mound, which is in Adams County, Ohio. A human-shaped bottle shows its, guts, we would say. And this is of a much more naturalistic quality than some of the more abstract forms that we see from some of these cultures. During the Mississippian period from about 600 to 1500 CE, Cahokia, Illinois was the site of a large ceremonial center with pyramidal structures. Find an image of Cahokia for you. And there's a photo of Cahokia, which by the way is in East St. Louis, Illinois, and not all that far away from the Quad Cities. During that time period, there is also evidence of a widespread culture known as the so-called Southern cult in the southeastern U.S., and this shares many cultural links with Mesoamerica. In the southwestern U.S., at ancient Hohokam, Sinagua, and ancient Pueblo, also called Anasazi cultures, cultivated the arid land through sophisticated irrigation techniques, even though they were what anthropologists would call Stone Age cultures. The ancient Pueblo or Anasazi built the immense masonry structure known as Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, which was a large ceremonial center for over 300 years. The round pits, called kiva, were once covered and are still used today by Pueblo spiritual leaders. You can see a kiva in the close-up of the Cliff Palace, which was used by the ancient Pueblo as a residence. You can see a kiva there. There are several issues that affect our understanding of North American cultures. Some of these issues make it difficult for scholars and students to study North American art. Some of those are issues of Western prejudice, and some issues are unique areas of inquiry that art historians and students find interesting. Many of these issues are the same as those that affect the study of African art. The first issue that Western students and scholars encounter is the use of oral traditions rather than literary ones. The lack of records give North American art a false sense of anonymity to those studying it from a Western point of view. Secondly, preservation of art is not part of most North American traditional value systems, and most art forms are made of media and materials that are non-permanent and erode quickly over short periods of time, or break. Furthermore, the study of North American art is affected by Western and European attitudes. Colonialism in the U.S. and Canada tend to perpetuate a view of Native Americans as the vanishing Indian, who is not only hopelessly traditional in a fatalistic way, but also not considered an integral part of modern society. Finally, the issue of authenticity is one of interest to contemporary scholars and students. The resurgence of Pueblo pottery, which you're seeing on the screen, in 20th century was spurred on by necessity. The reservations were very poor, and the desire to perpetuate tradition. You can see some modern examples imitating the older pottery. Artists like Maria Martinez and Numpeo looked to the sherds of ancient Pueblo pottery, like those pots we've just seen, for inspiration. In the ensuing generations between those ancient Pueblo potters and the 20th century, the symbols' meanings have been lost. What then makes a work authentic and representative of Native American culture? Does an artwork by a Native American have to replicate traditional ideas and imagery to be considered genuinely Native American? Is the concept of authenticity one that considers Native Americans' point of view at all, or is it a purely colonial concern? These are, of course, questions that no one has definitive answers for, but are central to contemporary discussions of Native American art. Well, that wraps up Week 12 on the Americas. Next week, we examine the art of ancient Africa in Week 13.